A recent Gallup poll found that only 54% of non-retired adults expect to live out their golden years, quote unquote, comfortably. But the flip side of this equation is that 79% of people who are already retired say that they are living comfortably. So, what's the disconnect? I think it boils down to two things. It boils down to fear and lack of information. And so today we're going to work on both of those things. We put out a call for top retirement questions, the things that keep people up at night. I'm going to talk through as many of them as I have time for. I'm going to stop at the end and I'm going to leave time to take your questions and answer your questions directly. My colleague Kelly is in the chat. She is monitoring that, gathering your questions along the way, or if you want to put them in the Q&A, that is also fine. So here we go. Question number one, how much do I really need for retirement? If you follow me on Twitter, you've seen that this is my standard answer. These are retirement benchmarks that if you follow them, you will amass enough money to essentially replace about 80% of your pre-retirement income in retirement when combined with Social Security. In order to hit the benchmarks, and the benchmarks are that you want to have 1 times your annual income saved by the time you hit age 30, 3 times at 40, 6 times at 50, 8 times at 60, and 10 times by the time that you actually retire. If you want to hit them, you want to be saving a consistent 15% of whatever it is that you're earning. That can include matching dollars from an employer. But the answer depends a little bit on how much you're earning now. The interesting thing about Social Security is that it replaces about 40% of a person's pre-retirement income on average. But the more that you earn, the less that it actually replaces. So if you are a lower earner, it could replace up to 75-ish% of your pre-retirement income. If you're a higher earner, maybe it'll replace 30 or 35%. The goal is to get a sense of what it will replace for you, because once you have that information, then you can focus on how do you save enough to make up the gap. You also want to look at how you're planning to live in retirement. This is where things get really, really personal. You want to look at how much you're spending today. That means actually looking at your numbers and asking yourself, is that likely to change in retirement? Do you think you'll spend more? Do you think you'll spend less? Why do you think that those things will change? Are you planning to downsize, or are you planning to buy a vacation home, right? Two very, very different scenarios. You want to look at how flexible you are on these things. One of the nice things that we've seen about current retirees is that they tend to be very resilient in their spending. In years when the markets are down, they choose to spend a little less. They've built in a little bit of flexibility for themselves. Often it's the difference between taking 1 vacation a year and taking 2. And the other question that becomes more important as life expectancies go up is, what is your plan for long-term care? For people who are on their own, in particular, it's really, really important to make sure that you've got a game plan for what happens if you should need care. This is what I was referring to before in looking at the amount of money in retirement that Social Security will cover. You can see as your earnings go up, the amount that it covers in retirement actually goes down. Okay, question number 2. What is the difference between a traditional and a Roth account? And how do I choose? Kudos to Kelly, by the way, for some of these pictures along the way. I think that they're really fun. So the difference between a traditional account and a Roth account, whether we're talking about a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA or a traditional 401k and a Roth 401k, is basically taxes. When you have a traditional account, you make a deposit into that account with pre-tax dollars. The money grows in a tax deferred way for as long as it is in that account. And then when you pull the money out, hopefully in retirement, you pay income taxes at your current income tax rate. This is a good move if you figure that your tax rate is going to be lower down the road than it is right now. So for people in your higher earning years, often making these traditional contributions is a good idea. The Roth is basically the flip side of that. When you put money into a Roth, you deposit money on which you have already paid taxes. That money is invested. It grows tax free. When you pull the money out in retirement, you don't have to pay taxes on it. And in fact, you don't have to pull the money out of that account if you don't want to, unlike traditional accounts on which there's a series of RMDs, required minimum distributions, that hit in your 70s. These don't have them. So if you want to pass along the money in a retirement account to your heirs, the Roth is going to be the better move. It's also the better move if you believe that your tax rate is going to be higher in retirement than it is right now. That could either be because you've saved a lot for retirement. Maybe you've got a pension kicking in combined with Social Security. Your income is actually going to go up in retirement rather than down. That happens for some people. Or it could be that you believe taxes in general are just going to have to go up. And a lot of people do believe that when they look at the deficit in this country. So you can look at that information and then make a decision about whether you want Roth, whether you want traditional, or whether you want both. And there is a good argument for having both. When you've got buckets of money, and IRAs and other accounts are essentially buckets of money that have different forms of taxation in retirement, you can make choices about which to pull from in which years. So a lot of retirees are working in retirement these days. If you have a year where your income is up substantially, maybe that's a year in which you pull your RMDs from the traditional accounts, but no more, and pull everything else from the Roth. You can make those sorts of decisions and buy yourself a little bit of flexibility. One other argument that people sometimes make here is that if it's not a stretch for you to pay the taxes now rather than down the road, a Roth can be beneficial. Sometimes people are not making full retirement contributions, and putting money into a traditional account allows you to make more of a contribution, which gives you more of a base of money that can then grow for your future. But if you can make a full contribution and you can do it with post-tax dollars without a lot of financial stress, it just gives you additional breathing room in the future. If you've never looked at your retirement picture and estimated, okay, this is how much I'm likely to pull out of my retirement accounts each year, and then tax those dollars to see what you're likely to net, what you're likely to take home, you want to do that exercise. The net is always a lot less than the gross. Many people find that they're surprised by that. So just a few suggestions. Question number 3. How do I deal with the fear of running out of money, particularly if I live too long or need a nursing home? It is such a good question. And I like to deal with fear in two different ways, with information and with action. So, piece of information number one that you need to have. How are you actually situated for retirement? It goes back to those calculations that I was talking about a second ago. About half of all people, all adults in this country have never even bothered to calculate the amount of money that they need for retirement and how long that money will last. If you go through this exercise, you'll get a really, really good sense of what kind of shape you're in today and whether you need to make adjustments to how much you're saving, how you're investing in order to have the kind of nest egg that you are looking at for the future. And if you don't know how to run those calculations or you want a helping hand in running those calculations, we run a program at Her Money called Finance Fix. It's Fix with two X's. Financefix.com is where you'll find information on that. Um, and we've just rolled out a pre-retirement checkup version of the Finance Fix program. So if that is something that you want to focus on, it's a course that you should look into taking. People find it very helpful to get a handle on their cash flows, but also to get a handle on what their number actually is. The second piece of information you want to know is how close you are to the benchmarks that I talked about. There's another set of benchmarks that some people prefer to use. Instead of looking at income benchmarks, they look at expense benchmarks. And if you can save 25 times the amount of money that you believe you'll need to spend in retirement, that's also a good way to calculate it because it allows you to pull out of your accounts at a rate of about 4% a year, which has been shown to work well for a lot of retirees. Third piece of information you want, if you do start spending down your assets and you need to go into a nursing home or you need at-home care. Depending on how long it takes you to do that, Medicaid will eventually step in. And Medicaid will start paying once your assets are exhausted. The way the Medicaid rules work, it'll also allow your spouse, if you have one, to hold on to the family home, as well as a certain number of assets. And if you're still, after all of that, feeling fearful, then it's time to step up your savings. It's time to think about talking to a financial advisor, or it's time to look into whether a long-term care insurance policy of some sort makes sense for you. Question number 4, will Social Security be there for me? I know that this is a very, very big fear for an awful lot of people. So let me just say that the answer is, in general, yes. What you've heard is that if the government does nothing, the Social Security Trust Fund, the primary Social Security Trust Fund, is going to run short of money somewhere around 2033 or 2034. Now, what does that mean, that it's going to run short of money? It does not mean that it's not going to pay people anything. It means that it will only be allowed to pay out what it takes in payroll taxes year to year. And right now, because there are more older people than younger people, it does mean that people will take a haircut on the amount of benefits that they've been promised by about 20%. That means that you would still get 80-ish% of the amount of money that you are seeing on your Social Security statement. And I know that is a big deal, right? 80% rather than 100% of what you've been counting on. That is a problem, which is why I don't believe it's going to happen. The government has a lot of different levers that it can pull on in order to change that scenario. Could bump up the retirement age a little bit. It could bump up taxes a little bit, not preferably, um, most likely on people who earn significant amounts of money. Why have they not done this yet? Because Social Security is basically the third rail. Neither party wants to talk about it. Neither party wants to deal with it, which is why a lot of experts believe they're not going to deal with this until they absolutely have to deal with it. But I fully believe that if they don't deal with it and make people whole on what they've been promised, we are going to have riots in the streets. So I expect that at least for people 50 and over, you will get what you've been promised. For people under 50, I do think that there will be some changes, likely a combo of an increase in payroll taxes and an increase of the retirement age. While we're talking about Social Security, let's talk about when you should take Social Security. There is a really, really good mathematical argument for waiting to take Social Security as long as you can. For every year that you wait to claim your benefits between age 62 and age 70, you get a bump in those benefits of about 8% a year. That is a return that is really, really difficult to beat in a guaranteed way, in any other way by investing your money. A, a group of economists from the Federal Reserve and from Boston University, they also looked at these numbers and they said virtually all US workers from age 45 to age 62 should really try to wait to beyond age 65 in order to claim their benefits. And 90% should claim at age 70. Now, when are you an exception to the rule? You're an exception to the rule if you need the money. If you need to claim your benefits in order to put dinner on the table, you claim your benefits. You're an exception to the rule if there's some sort of a health event in your life that makes it likely that you will not live into your mid 80s. You need to live into your mid 80s for the math on waiting until age 70 to make sense. And you may be an exception depending on marital status and how close in age or close in income you are to your spouse. So if you're in a marriage where you have a big age discrepancy or a big income discrepancy, sometimes it makes sense for one spouse to claim earlier. But there are calculators that will run those numbers for you and tell you the precise month that it makes sense to claim. One of those calculators is a website called maximizemysocialsecurity.com that was developed by an economist named Larry Kotlikoff. He's written a couple of best-selling books. That can be a very good way to go. The tool costs about, I think, $39 to use. So well worth it. There is also an argument to be made that it makes sense to wait to take Social Security, even if you have to pull some money out of your retirement accounts in the years between, say, 65, 66, and 70 in order to live. If you retire, you may want to look into what is called a bridging strategy, where you start pulling bits of money out of your Roth or out of your traditional IRA so that you can still give the money in your Social Security account more time to grow. Why am I having a difficult time spending money in retirement? I I love this question so much. It is psychological. You have probably somewhere along the way heard somebody say to you, never spend your principal. Um, but the fact is, uh, for decades after you started saving all of this money for retirement, spending your principal is exactly what you need to do. You need to do it in a measured way, in a thoughtful way, in a planned way. But this is what the money is meant for. The problem is that people like me have been telling you again for 4 decades, save, 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 accumulate, accumulate, accumulate. Don't pull money out of your 401k. Don't pull money out of your IRA. And then we ask you to flip a switch and start using that money. And it's scary. It's hard to see the balance going down rather than going up. And that can lead you to live in your retirement not as well as you actually could. What we're seeing by the numbers is that there are many, many retirees uh, who a couple of decades into retirement still have huge amounts of their money. One study looked at people who had saved $500,000, not including the value of their homes. By year 20 of retirement, they had spent only 12% of their money. That's a median figure. And that's just a shame, because it means that after dreaming about a retirement where you travel, where you start interesting hobbies and do new things, many people are just not doing them. So how do you solve for this psychological problem? One way to do it is by taking a chunk of your retirement money and using it to essentially buy yourself a paycheck that will last the rest of your life. The tools that we use to do this are called annuities. There are a lot of different kinds of annuities. Some are more complicated than others, some are more expensive than others, but they all provide a paycheck that lasts for a guaranteed period of time, often as long as you live, sometimes as long as you live and your spouse lives. And again, what research has shown is that these people who have equivalent amounts of money, one structured as a paycheck and the other structured as a lump sum in a retirement account, the people who get the paycheck are spending twice as much money and they're feeling better about it. They're actually feeling less fearful and a little bit happier. So if that sounds to you like something that you're interested in, these are the kind of instruments that you want to start to look for. And if you have a 401k at work, you should know that there was a recent change in the law that is going to allow for more of these income solutions to be provided right through your 401k. So you want to keep an eye out for them. What are the best RMD and retirement withdrawal strategies? Let's talk about the retirement withdrawal strategies first. The goal is to make your money last for a good 30 years. That's a good retirement time horizon. One way to do it is to adhere to what we call the 4% rule. Pull 4% of your money out of your retirement accounts at the first year of retirement, adjust it for inflation, uh, year in and year out, and continue to pull 4%. In years where the markets don't do as well, your 4% is going to be a little lower. In years where the markets do a little better, your 4% might be a little higher. You keep the money invested in a portfolio of 60% stocks and 40% bonds. It's been shown to work. You could go with a strategy that's called dynamic withdrawals, which is where you really adjust your withdrawals based more on the performance of the markets. If the markets are doing better, you take a little more percentage wise. If they're doing worse, you take a little less. And finally, there's a fixed dollar withdrawal strategy where you set an amount that you're going to take for the first 5 years of retirement. And at the end of that 5 years, you revisit that strategy. As far as RMDs, the most important strategy that I want to point you to is this idea um, of making sure that you use your retirement accounts to delay Social Security, because pulling money out of those retirement accounts earlier on actually reduces your RMDs down the road. You can also, if you are inclined to give to charity, you can give directly from an IRA. You can donate up to $100,000 a year directly to a charity. That money, even though it's not going to you, but going to a charity, still counts towards your RMDs. I'm going to pause here and not actually go through the rest of the questions. I'm going to ask my colleague Kelly to come on screen. And I see that the number of questions is just growing and growing and growing. And so, Kelly, I want to make sure we leave enough time to answer the questions of the people who are here.
I think that's great. And we'll also have the full presentation available with our friends at Town and Country. So you'll be able to see the other three questions, and we can provide some educational content to pair with them as well.
Great.
So I've been collecting your questions. Thank you for all of the amazing ones that have come through the chat. We're going to first start with Mary's. Mary is 61 and she is planning to work until 70 with the idea of delaying Social Security. And she has also flagged that she's concerned about that 80% data point that you said of expectations around what she can get from Social Security. She's wondering though, should I put money directly into top stocks like Google or Amazon to grow her money faster as part of a catch-up move to save more towards retirement?
I know it's really tempting, Mary, to try to pick the stocks that are going to be the big winners. But a lot of research has been done over the years that points to the fact that your asset allocation, which is the amount that you have in each bucket, not individual stocks, but individual buckets, stocks versus bonds versus cash, is actually responsible for about 90% of the return on your money. So I would say, make sure that you've got that asset allocation right for your age. At 61, you probably want a good 60-40 kind of a strategy because you've got so many years left. That's the strategy that a lot of different pension funds have followed. Excuse me, you could taper off a little bit, but it doesn't sound like you want to. And if you decide that you are going to try to cherry pick some stocks, I would only do it with a small part of your portfolio. And I would make sure that you get a good education in those stocks. In addition to Finance Fix, we run a program called Investing Fix every other Monday night. It's an investing club for women. I teach it with my friend Karen Feinerman, who is a professional stock picker. You can see her on CNBC. And we're doing fundamental analysis into stocks. We look at, for every stock that we consider, we look at what it does, what we like about it, what we don't like about it, and whether it's a buy at the current price. And then we have some fun every month. We consider four stocks, and once a month the group votes on which of those stocks to add to our portfolio. So we have had Google and Amazon and some of the other big tech names, but interestingly, of late, with interest rates coming down and and people investing more in their homes. The group has chosen to add things like Home Depot, which is expected to experience a bit of a run. So I would say if that's something that you're interested in, join us for that. The first month is free, and we'd love to see you there.
Thank you. And she's also wondering, can a person keep working and collect Social Security?
Yes. A person can keep working and collect Social Security. Social Security will penalize you depending on how much you earn, but you get the money back down the road. So you'll get a little bit less from Social Security in real time if you continue to earn, but you'll make up for it once you stop working.
Got it. And we've received a number of questions around, this one in particular. What is retirement age? Is it 62? Is it 65? And then there's also a follow-up question from Jane now. And when you say plan for 30 years, should we be planning from 62 or 65? What are the differences between those two?
So personally, I'm planning to live to be 100. Now, I don't really hope that I live to be 100, but I'm looking at longevity statistics and I'm realizing there's not an impossible chance that you're going to live to be that old, and that's because of the way that longevity works. The longer you live, the longer you are likely to live. So right now we know that 65-year-olds on average live to be 84. But what that means is that half of all of those 65-year-olds, they hit 84 and they just keep going. And about 25% of them make it till 90. 10% make it to 95, and the number of people over age 100 has been skyrocketing since the 1950s. So if you think that not if you think that running out of money is worse than spending a little less through the years to provide yourself with a buffer, as I do, you pick a number that's pretty high. Retirement age, according to the Social Security Administration, is 67. That's your quote unquote full retirement age. But a lot of people are continuing to work well beyond that. There's a trend now in what is called a phased retirement where people start start to just do a little less of whatever it is that they are doing right now to ease their way into retirement. That's very, very helpful from both a financial perspective and a psychological perspective. Really hard to leave the office one day and just never go back.
Thank you, Jean. Our next one is from Jay. They write, I am 60 and retired. My pension covers most of my expenses at this time. What asset allocation is recommended for my investments? Should I move to more fixed income investments? And if so, what is the best way to reallocate? Bonds historically have been so low in performance that I don't have much in that area. I'm about 80-20 at this point.
So it sounds to me like you probably are doing it right, and here's why. Um, with those benchmarks that I talked about before, if you are one of those people fortunate enough to have a pension, first of all, you can back off from those benchmarks by the whatever percentage of your current spending that pension covers. So your own savings are meant to cover about 45% of your pre-retirement income. If you know that your pension is going to cover 15%, then it's only really up to you to save for 30%. Pensions act like bonds. Pensions are uh, they're going to provide you with a return that is already essentially locked in. You know what it's going to be. And because you have a certain component that's covered by a bond like pension, you can actually take more risk with the rest of your portfolio. So having a higher equity allocation makes sense.
And a number of questions around the benchmarks. Terry's question is the assumption for savings from slide 1 that if you have 8 times your income saved by 60, can you retire at 65? Meaning I didn't see the assumed retirement age in that calculation.
There is no assumed retirement age in that calculation. You gotta the assumption is that you'll get to 10 times, and that's about when it's safe to retire.
Okay. And then Margaret was wondering, can a person have multiple Roth accounts?
Sure. Um, a person yes, a person can have multiple Roth accounts. What you can't do though is overfund your Roth. You can't essentially double dip on the tax benefits. So if you're putting money into a Roth account through work and you're maxing out, then you are not going to put money into a different Roth account.
Fantastic. And Jean, believe it or not, we've hit on all of the major questions or category of questions. So if you want to go to the next slide, I think we have time.
Amazing. What are the pros and cons of original Medicare and supplemental insurance versus Medicare Advantage? Complicated, but let's go through it because it's that time of year. So, for original Medicare plus a supplemental plan, which is often called Medigap, um, one of the pros is choice. Um, you often have more choices of doctors and things like that. You do have to pick supplemental coverage at the very, very beginning. You can't pick it and then go back from Medicare Advantage. So if you know that you're going to want a Medigap policy, don't go with a Medicare Advantage policy out of the gate. With Medi Make sure that you go with Medigap first. You can, when you're on an original Medicare, choose any provider that accepts Medicare. You don't need a referral to see a specialist. You don't have to worry about doctors leaving a network. Um, Vision, hearing, dental. Those things are not covered in original Medicare. So you are going to have to get them through your supplement. And if you go this route, you have to buy Part D insurance for prescriptions. Original Medicare doesn't include them. On original Medicare, there are no out-of-pocket limits, but some supplements have them. Some supplements will backstop you. If you go with Medicare Advantage in the beginning, again, just keep in mind, Medigap policies do not have to accept you later on. Some Medicare Advantage plans run like PPOs, some run like HMOs. With the ones that operate like HMOs, you may not have any coverage for out-of-network providers except in the cases of emergencies. So if you travel a lot or you have a second home in a different area, this can be a concern. You may need a referral from a primary care provider in order to see a specialist. If you have Medicare Advantage that works more like a PPO, you can often see out-of-network providers, but they will cost more than in-network providers. One of the benefits is that vision, dental, and hearing will often be covered by Medicare Advantage. Most Advantage plans include prescription drug coverage. There is an out-of-pocket limit in network. It's $88,850. Out of network, it's $13,300. Some plans have lower limits. But often Medicare Advantage plans are cheaper, at least out of the gate. They just don't typically cover as much. Um, and that is, I guess, is that all that we have time for? Or are you back with another question?
I'm back with a healthcare related question. We have a few more minutes.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if where or the connection here. But Angela has a question on HSAs. She's
Hmm.
looking at one as an investment option or with an investment option, and she does have a high deductible plan. She's wondering about the pros and cons. And I'm curious too, can HSAs be factored into Medicare Plus and Medicare Advantage as well?
No.
No?
The connection, no. HSAs are for your working years and your savings years. Um, if you had an HSA and then you retire, you can use the money in your HSA in retirement to pay for unreimbursed costs, even to pay for your Medicare premiums. So it can be very useful there, and you won't be taxed on those dollars. Um, the so not very many people, let me just back up. An HSA is a health savings account. If you buy a high deductible health insurance plan, in most cases, you qualify to open a health savings account into which you can deposit pre-tax dollars. The money can be invested to grow tax-free. And when you pull the money out, as long as you use it to pay for unreimbursed medical expenses, you don't pay any taxes on that money. So these accounts are what they call triple tax free. They're very valuable. Um, a lot of people don't invest the money in their HSAs. They use them as sort of pass through accounts. And because they are essentially taking pre-tax dollars and using those dollars to pay for healthcare needs, they're saving about 25% on all those healthcare expenses. So that in and of itself is a really valuable benefit. But if you don't need to use the money in real time, the year you deposit it, in order to pay for your medical expenses, you can invest it in mutual funds, you can grow it, and you can use it down the road. And that allows an HSA to essentially become a supplemental retirement account. It's very, very similar to a Roth IRA. It has a lot of the same benefits. And what a lot of people don't know is that it's not like you're not going to have healthcare expenses in those years in which you're not using the money from your HSA to pay for them. So save all of your receipts for years. Eventually, when you pull the money out of your HSA, you can use all of those receipts to just write them off against the money that you're pulling out and pay no taxes. So
I didn't
there
know
you go.
that either. It's a fantastic tip and fantastic note to end on. Jean, if you wouldn't mind skipping to the last slide, just so for people to learn more or where they can reach out. And that'll do it.
Thank you guys very much for listening, and thanks for all the great questions.